Yahweh has prepared for each and every one of us a place of ministry. It doesn't have to be behind a pulpit or even to a foreign country, a nation. But He has a place exactly set for you. He has prepared that place, basically our own Garden of Eden. And it is from that point, when we find that position, it is our responsibility to tend to it, to care for it, to watch over it, to be a watchman in our area. I'm Dr. Ray, and welcome to this week's Hosea International Speaks. Last week, we just got started into the chapter 2 of Genesis. So let's continue with that. And Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3 says this: "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them." In other words, Yahweh had just completed His creation and His restoration. And verse 2 says this: "And on the seventh day, Yahweh ended His work which He had made, and He rested on the seventh day from all His works which He had made." Verse 3, "And Yahweh blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it He had rested from all of His work which Yahweh created and made." There's a lot we could say about this portion of Scripture, especially when we start to talk about the Sabbath. But we'll try to keep it short. First, Yahweh restored everything in the 6 days that we read before. And then He took the seventh day and He rested from all His works, and He blessed it, blessed the seventh day, and then He sanctified it. The Hebrew word here for sanctified is the word kadash, meaning to consecrate, sanctify, and listen to this, and even prepare, dedicate, be hallowed, be holy, and to separate, or to be set apart. What Yahweh did was He separated the seventh day from all of the other days, as seen in the different meanings prior. He set it apart and made it different, says the Scripture. Now, the prime root for the seventh is the word Shabbat, where the word Shabbat and our English word Sabbath comes from. Note, now this is the only day of the week that was given a name. The other days of the week were given numbers. For example, the first day of the week, the second and the third and fourth, and so on. Note also that the word for rested is the Hebrew word Shabbat, and it means to cease, to stop, to desist from all works. This ceasing or stopping from all works means to stop from the normal activities. In other words, you and I go to work. Some of us start at 6, some at 7, and some at 8. And then even so, there are all those that start at 9, and they work until 3, 4, or 5. The 9 to 3 is what I call banker's hours, which is I used to do when I was a teller. I worked from 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, but actually I didn't quit at 3. There was other things. The bank closed at 3, and then there were other things that we had to do before we left that day at 5 o'clock. Now, just a question here was, he then allowing for more creation to be done by his creation? In other words, the way the word is used here is to show that the works of creation ceased. It was finished. There was no more that Yahweh was going to create. Now, with that, then, was there any other creation that was going to be allowed? That will be seen in the future, because I believe that part of creation will be given to his greatest creation, man. Note also now, just because Yahweh finished creating does not mean he is idle or just sitting in heaven with his arms crossed. The word translated works implies is sending us a message through his actions. In other words, he has given us the picture, or the picture is being set to us, that Yahweh works in his message and that he is not idle. The word implies a message through action. In other words, if I had a business, my message through that would be my actions in my business, in my workmanship, in the stuff that I do. It also states here that the Sabbath was instituted before there was a nation of Israel. So we see the Sabbath being established way before Israel ever came out of Egypt. They were just the first nation to follow what Yahweh had set in motion, which gives us, which asks a question today is, when did the Sabbath actually end for us today? Well, for the Jewish nation or Israel, it still continues. The Sabbath was changed for the church, as we call the church, in the 4th century by Constantine during the Council of Laodicea. It was at this time that the Sabbath, as the day of worship, ceased, and that it would begin then what we would call the first day. The reason for this was they considered, Constantine and the church at the time, they considered the Sabbath, or the Shabbat, the Jewish day of worship. Note now, Yahweh reinstituted that when he set down the rules. In other words, he reinstituted the Shabbat, or the Sabbath, when he set down the rules and ordinance on Mount Sinai after Israel had left Egypt. You can find that in Exodus chapter 16, verse 26. In the book of Exodus, he commanded Israel to work 6 days, and on the Sabbath, they were to rest. Now, let me just say this, because the church says, no, now our day of Sabbath will be, or our day of rest will be the first day of the week. Now, and we call that Sunday. Now, just to give you some backgrounds on the word Sunday, so just in case you guys churches want to start moving back to the Sabbath or the Saturday, which we call Saturday. Sunday was the Roman day for worshiping their god, which was the sun god, or where they call Sunday. So in other words, you can begin to see that just a little bit. Now, just getting back into chapter 2, where was Adam formed? It is believed that in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount, there is what is called the foundation stone, which is approximately 3 fingers above the ground. And if this was to be the ground, then the foundation stone would be about 3 fingers high. In the Hebrew, this stone is called the Even Hashatia, the Jerusalem. Now, today, the dome of the mosque is presently located over the Even Shatia, or the foundation stone, which was built in 691 AD, so that you can see that the temple was built back at the time of Solomon. Okay, and it is believed that when Yahweh formed Adam, it was done on the Even Shatia, and then he placed him in the Garden of Eden, which would be in an eastward direction. And when the first temple was built by Solomon, it was built on this exact spot, the Even Shatia, before it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. Now you ask, will the temple ever be rebuilt? Yes, it will be rebuilt according to Ezekiel chapters 40 through 44, and this will be the third and final temple before the second coming of Jesus to the earth. Now note, not the rapture. The rapture is going to take place prior to Jesus coming back with his church, or with his body, and he will set his foot on the mount. Now, let's continue with chapter 2 of Genesis. Notice Yahweh placing the Garden of Eden eastward. Now, there are some differentiations as to where the Garden of Eden is located. Scripture tells us it was located eastward, and I believe it was east of what we call the foundation stone, or the Even Shatia, somewhere in what I would call today's modern day Iraq and Iran, where the Ur of Chaldees is located, and where the 4 rivers of Genesis meet: the Pishon, the Gihon, the Hiddekel, and the fourth river, the Euphrates River. This is where human race, Adam and Eve, was established. And so what we have here, when you begin to read the scripture, it tells you where the rivers were, and that from the Garden of Eden, it splits into 4 different rivers. And you can read that in Genesis chapter 1. In other words, you begin to see actually chapter 2, and you begin to see where the garden was established and where man was placed, where the Garden of Eden and where Adam was placed to now begin to operate in his calling, in his ministry. We're going to pick up there again next week, and we'll look at the garden and what Yahweh exactly did with Adam when he placed him there, and he told him to name all the animals and the responsibility he had in caring for the Garden of Eden. I'm Dr. Ray, and we'll see you next week on Hosea International Speaks.